Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the celebration of 25 amazing years. 25 years ago, a million gay and lesbian people, LGBT people, marched on Washington for basic human rights, to look at the importance of AIDS and HIV funding. They wanted the right to serve in the military openly. They wanted to repeal sodomy laws. They wanted very basic rights to be recognized as valuable and contributing citizens. And just a few months after that, Richard Schneider started what was the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review and what's now the Gay and Lesbian Review worldwide. And we've been there for the past 25 years, chronicling our lives, mourning those who've left us, sharing our stories, helping us understand the challenges that we all face, studying our history and explaining it, celebrating our progress, showcasing a journey that all of us have taken and that we're still undergoing right now. This is a celebration of the progress of those 25 years. And as Art said, well, we're facing some challenges right now. It's a testament to our amazing editor-in-chief and publisher, Richard Schneider, who has had the vision to start the review and to lead us through the past 25 years, and to the amazing team of volunteers who've helped us along the way. And of course, to our board of directors who have helped guide us through these 25 years and help build the organization into what it is today. Who knows what the next 25 years will bring, but we know that with the Gay and Lesbian Review, our progress will be chronicled and celebrated. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Richard Schneider and thank him and celebrate his accomplishment, our collective accomplishment here at the Review.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart, and thank all of you for coming. By all rights, this event should not exist. It should not be happening. We are the definition of a niche magazine, and niche magazines don't last 25 years. Usually they're lucky to put out their second issue, and here we are 25 years later. I'm actually working on issue 134 at the moment. So I don't know. So I'm exhausted. But stretch it out over a 25-year period, it's not so bad. And it is kind of amazing. So actually, Art already did some of the work for me by pointing out that 25 years ago was 1993. 1994 was the 25th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots. So if you look at those years, our first issue came out in winter 1994, which was that 25th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots. And so next year is their 50th anniversary, and actually officially next year is our 25th anniversary. So we kind of mark off exactly one half of the so-called modern LGBT movement. And that's kind of interesting, I think. It's like one generation that we have been able to chronicle. I think those guys both used the word, and appropriately, as kind of what we do as the gay and lesbian movement has progressed over this quarter century. So here we are, 25 years later, and it has been an amazing 25 years. So let me take you back to 1993, 1994, which is when the magazine was first taking shape. It was an amazing time, and I think in many ways it was a turning point. If you look at that period in the early to mid 90s, Art mentioned that there was a great big march on Washington in 1993. I think it was the largest of them all. I was actually at the marches in 87, 93, and 2000. I think the one that topped 1 million was the march in 1993. Bill Clinton had just taken office, and he was immediately socked with the so-called gays in the military crisis. And that, of course, resulted ultimately in the Don't Ask, Don't Tell compromise, which was kind of a bad thing. It was a critical time, and in some ways not such a great time, really, in the history of our movement. There was a very important Supreme Court decision. It was actually the Supreme Court of Hawaii that essentially legalized marriage equality for the first time. So it was the first glimmer, really, of the whole movement toward marriage equality. But it was immediately reversed by legislative action in Hawaii that passed a constitutional amendment that essentially struck down marriage equality. So that was kind of a false start, and then that launched all of those DOMAs, remember them, the Defense of Marriage Acts, that started around that time and continued for at least the next decade or so, which was kind of another big challenge for us. Again, thinking sort of toward the mid-90s, it was in many ways the worst period for the AIDS epidemic. Things got better the next, well, say 1996 with the antiretrovirals. So that's kind of the backdrop of the founding of the Gay and Lesbian Review. I very often talk about sort of the mechanics of how we got started. We came out of a Harvard organization, the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Caucus, and I was the editor of their newsletter, and the magazine sort of grew out of that. But I think more interesting is the issue of, or the question of the energy, the oomph, the motivation behind setting up a magazine like this in 1993. And that's kind of it. That's what was going on. And I think that energy and that sense of crisis and also opportunity are very much in evidence if you go back and look at the early issues of what was then the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review. And so, just to recite, not recite, but mention a couple of the issues that were being addressed. Make sure I get the right glasses here. I have two different pairs. Right in the very beginning of our first year, we featured an article by David Bergman, which was an open letter to Bruce Bauer. He had written a book called A Place at the Table, which you may remember. And it was kind of a conservative screed that said, you know what? The strategies of the last 25 years since Stonewall haven't worked. You know, we're kind of at the end of this liberationist era. And there were other books as well that maybe came from a more leftist perspective, books by Frank Browning and Michelangelo Signorelli and Gabriel Rotelli. There were a lot of books that I think captured this idea that we're at a kind of important moment, kind of a crisis, kind of a turning point, a sense that we've reached a state of exhaustion with the model of liberation that dated back to Stonewall. And so at that time, there was an increasing movement toward a kind of mainstreaming or maybe an assimilation of the LGBT movement. So in addition to the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review, which came out, as I said, in 1994, Out Magazine was founded at around the same time in 1993. And there were other magazines like Genre and 10% and Instinct, which were, so-called mainstream. They looked like, Time magazine. For the first time, we actually had slick magazines instead of, hippie-looking magazines. So that was a big change. By the way, the GLR or the HGLR kind of, for the first number of years, did kind of look more like a hippie magazine. So as I say, I think that this sense of crisis and of energy is reflected in the early issues of the HGLR. And I also think that in many ways, the fundamental issues that would remain prevalent for the next 25 years were set in place at that time and have sort of continued to unfold since then. I mentioned the whole issue of kind of assimilationism versus liberation as one of them. We did a science issue, and I've always been very interested in kind of the whole question of the origins of homosexuality, and so we had an issue that included like Simon LeVay and Camille Paglia of all people, and a number of others, Richard Pillard, who were concerned with kind of the science. It's been, for me at least, an important theme over this quarter century. And sort of bringing it home in a recent issue, this is actually from earlier this year, there's a wonderful article by a guy named James O'Keefe that is an attempt at a scientific argument about the evolutionary origins of homosexuality. It's really quite brilliant, and it reflects this extraordinary change and progress that's happened in science and in sort of our understanding of DNA and epigenetics over that period of time. So I think that a case could be made that many of the important issues of LGBT rights and culture were present in our first few years and have sort of projected themselves forward to the present time, and we've covered those issues. I would hope successfully during that time, and the magazine, the articles reflect the extraordinary changes in progress and development that has taken place during that period. Just a couple of other little notes on an early article by Barney Frank called "Time to Think Strategy." Again, the sense that we really need to look long and hard at the sort of realpolitik of gay rights, and of course that has always been Barney Frank's position, as opposed to an article by Tony Kushner at this time, coming much more from a leftist perspective, which was called "Art, Angels, and Postmodern Fascism." I wanted to get that phrase, postmodern fascism, a phrase that he used, which I think has a certain resonance in our day, maybe, and in a scary kind of way, and maybe very prescient on the part of the brilliant Tony Kushner. It's interesting also, speaking of Tony Kushner, that Angels in America opened in 1993. So going back to that era, and here it is revived on Broadway again this year. So during, and when Angels in America was produced in 1993 on Broadway, it was really quite radical. It actually used the word gay in the name of the play. At that time, rather extraordinary, it's still an extraordinary play, of course, but it was really rare and unusual and almost strange for a play like that to be produced on Broadway. Now it's, old hat. Think about where gay culture is now as opposed to where it was 25 years ago. We've had movies like Brokeback Mountain and, I don't know, just in the last 6 months, a movie like Call Me By Your Name or Love, Simon, both of which are pretty good. So lots has happened. It's been an eventful 25 years, and that certainly is, as I say, very much reflected in the magazine. And let's see, I just crunched the numbers. We have published over 1,000 feature articles at this point, and something like 4,000 total articles, if you count all the book reviews and everything else that we've published. So that's kind of where we are. As you may know, every issue has a theme, and the range of topics that we've covered, I think, is really quite vast. To use a phrase that Tennessee Williams used, we have covered the waterfront. Just to give you an idea, here are some recent themes, just recent, like in the last few years. Subcultures of gaydom, 30 years of HIV, Analyze What, which is about psychology, gay rights around the world. We've done a number of international issues. Sex culture, the first gay novel. We had 8 contenders. The movies. We've done a number of issues that focus just on the movies. Election 2016, but we did election, and every single year, actually, since our founding, we've major presidential elections. We've done a special issue, and I might add, Barney Frank has contributed to every one of them. Gender studied, so the whole issue of gender has come up again and again. And Bodies in Motion about dance. Body image is the issue that is about to come out, and which many of you will have in your mailboxes in a matter of a couple of weeks, which is about art. So that's a sense of the magazine and what we've done over the last 25 years. And of course, we've had a huge amount of help. Obviously, the writers, which there have been something like 1,300 different individuals have written for the magazine over that period of time, rather an extraordinary number. But I especially want to thank our board of directors, Stuart Clifford, of course, who is our chair and has been for many, many years. I also want to thank the people who helped to put together this event, which includes Art Cohen, who you met a moment ago, and Art also did the video. So take a look at the video. It shows past issues. Oh, there's the current issue right there. Amazing, what a coincidence. And the other people who helped out with this are Ted Higginson, David LaFontaine, and, not to be forgotten, my partner, Stephen Hemrick, without whom none of this would have been possible. Stephen really is the one who kind of worked himself to the bone to make this happen. And so thank you to Stephen and to the other people that contributed, as well as to the board.